Dun-dun-dun. Hi friends, welcome back to my blog, Walking Through the Word. This is part 2 of Genesis 1 through 10. This is 6 through 10. Genesis 6 through 10, super short. I'm not going to break it down the way that I did the other chapters. This is going to be something that you guys will have to read independently. 6 through 10 talks about the flood. So just some background. Chapter 6, God noticed that creation was just so wicked. People were just so evil that God said, you know what? I'm grieved. I repent that I even made creation to begin with. I'm going to wipe them out. And people might think that God was being evil, but the reality was that the world was so full of sin. Could you imagine a world? And let me paint a picture for you, because I want you to think that it wasn't something great, like something small. It was so extreme that God said, I have to. Can you imagine a world where people rape because they feel like it? Like, they have sex with people because they feel like it. Animals, dogs, kids, because they feel like it. They want to. Murder because they feel like it. Oh, I want that house. I'm going to kill you for it. Imagine people just running rampant. There was a place of anarchy. Nobody respects any kind of authority because they don't respect God's authority. And God said, I'm so grieved that I have to wipe them out. The Bible does not tell us the sins of in this chapter. The Bible does not tell us the sins of the world and why God had to wipe them out. But I am speculating, right? I'm giving an example. I want to paint a picture of how evil it could have been to where God thought, I can't do this. So that is why God sent the flood. And in chapter 8, so I'm skipping chapter 7. So chapter 7 talks about Noah being on the boat, on the ark. And he was on the ark for a long time. He was on the ark for a long, I think about a year. Noah was on the ark. It took a whole year for this whole thing to happen. And what I find interesting was that Noah and his family were the only ones on the boat. And in chapter 6, and it's like, how significant is it that some of us are the only believers in a room full of sinners? Some of us are the only believers. Not to say that I'm perfect, but some of us are the only light in a dark place, and we need to not take that for granted. It's very important to always take a stand for God, even if we are the only ones doing so. So one of the greatest lessons, I learned from reading the book of Noah, the story of Noah was God gave Noah a command, and in verse 20, he said, I want you to take, in chapter 6, he said, I want you to take 2 of every animal with you. And it's interesting because it's just like, where am I going to find these people from? And it said in verse 20 that God said that the animals will come to you. I'm going to do all the work. I want you to create the ark. I'll provide, obviously, the materials. I'll provide everything for you. Sometimes we get so scared and so shell-shocked when God puts us in a position and he gives us a mission. If you look at the ark was huge. Like, to carry so many animals, only 8 people were in the ark. Noah and his 3 sons. And each of the men had wives. So there were 8 people. Every man had a wife. And it was only them and animals, and they had to bring enough food, not just for themselves, but for the animals. And they had a lot to do, but God provides. So sometimes it seems like God gives us a task. It's just like, how is this even possible to accomplish? But God sends the right material. He's always true to his word, and he will provide. He's a provider. Jehovah Jireh, right? That's one of his names in the Old Testament. Jehovah Jireh, I think Hagar called him Jehovah Jireh. It means the Lord will provide. God is a provider. So don't freak out when God gives you a mission. You're just like, what? God provides. Trust me. Help is on the way. So Genesis 6 introduces us to the reasons behind the flood and the beginning portion of the flood. Chapter 7 takes us through the flood and how long it lasted. And chapter 8 gives us a visual of what happened after the flood. And it walks us through the events that took place after the flood. And after the flood, Noah made a sacrifice to God, and God was pleased with the sacrifice. And God promised that he will never destroy the earth by flood again, and he sent a rainbow as a symbol of his covenant with the world. So every time I wonder sometimes, like, well, why does it flood in certain areas? It floods in certain areas, but it won't flood in the entire area. And when God sent the flood, he wiped out the entire earth. Like, he didn't wipe out East Atlanta Zone 6. He didn't wipe out Bronx, New York. He wiped out North America, South America, like Australia, Asia, Europe, Africa. He wiped Antarctica. Wiped everybody out. The only thing that lived that were not in the ark were the fish, because I mean, fish can't drown. And once again, it was because the world was so increasingly evil. Imagine, we live in a world where there's wicked and we always call for help. We call on our politicians. We call on everything. So imagine a time period where it's so evil, right? And everybody's participating in the evil, right? So people, you couldn't even call anybody. They doing wrong too. It was so wicked that God had no choice but to destroy. And we will see the same thing in Genesis chapter 19 with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. So essentially, chapter 9 once again gives a genealogy. So that's the next chapter. Actually, in chapter 9, God is explaining His covenant about the rainbow and also talking about the sons. Chapter 10 is when is where the lineages of the men were written and their geographical locations of the generations that came from them are recorded in chapter 10. So the story of Noah and the Ark, I want you to read on your own. There are a lot of messages here. I didn't take a lot of notes on this portion. Sorry. If I got something, I'll deliver it to you. But I want you guys to give me something. Like, send me a comment, send some notes, right? So this is all I have for Genesis. That's what 6 through 10 is all about. I wanted to give like a summary, so at least you know what 6 through 10 is about. That's what you'll find in chapter 6 through 10. And I will see you guys in a few weeks, and we will be going through Genesis chapter 11 through 20. I'm excited. See you guys soon.